September 15th, 2008, Monday morning, New York City. Lehman Brothers, one of the oldest and most powerful banks on Wall Street, opened its doors for the last time. 158 years of history, gone in a single morning. The stock market went into free fall. Millions of ordinary people watched their savings disappear. Governments scrambled to print trillions of dollars to bail out the very banks that had caused the disaster. The world's trust in the financial system shattered like glass. To understand why Bitcoin was created, you first have to understand what happened, not just in 2008, but in the years before it. Because the disaster of 2008 didn't arrive without warning. It was built, brick by brick, over an entire decade. The late 1990s and early 2000s, America was riding a wave. Interest rates were low, credit was cheap, banks were lending money to virtually anyone who walked through the door. Want to buy a house but have no income? No problem. Here's a mortgage. Want to buy a second house? A third? Sign here. And here. And here. This was the era of the subprime mortgage. Banks offering home loans to people who, under any rational standard, could never afford to repay them. But the banks weren't worried, because they had a trick. They took these risky mortgages, thousands of them, and bundled them together into something called mortgage-backed securities, complex financial products that were sold to investors all over the world. And those products were given AAA ratings by the credit agencies. Safe, solid, reliable. Except they weren't. Not even close. The whole structure was a house of cards, built on loans that would never be repaid, rated as safe by agencies who didn't look closely, sold to pension funds, insurance companies, and banks around the entire world, from New York to London to Tokyo to Sydney. Everyone was holding a time bomb and calling it a treasure chest. 2006, the first cracks appeared. Housing prices, which had risen for years, started to fall, slowly at first, then faster. Homeowners who had borrowed more than their house was worth began to default on their loans. Banks who had lent recklessly began to discover the size of their losses. March 2008. Bear Stearns, one of the most prestigious investment banks on Wall Street, collapsed in the span of 72 hours. A bank that had traded at $172 per share just weeks before was sold for $2 per share. Bought by JP Morgan Chase in an emergency deal backed by the Federal Reserve. $2 a share. For a bank that employed 14,000 people and had stood for 85 years. The financial world held its breath. But that was just the opening act. September 15th, 2008, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. Not a fire sale, just bankruptcy. The largest bankruptcy filing in the history of the United States. $613 billion in debt. 25,000 employees. Gone overnight. The Federal Reserve had decided not to bail them out. They wanted to send a message. They wanted to prove that the government would not simply rescue every reckless bank. What happened instead sent a very different message, that the entire system could fail. The morning after Lehman collapsed, AIG, the world's largest insurance company, was also on the brink. The Fed had to step in with $85 billion. Merrill Lynch, another icon of Wall Street, was absorbed by Bank of America in an emergency overnight deal. Washington Mutual, the largest savings bank in America, failed 10 days later. Investors pulled $144 billion out of money market funds in 1 week. The short-term lending markets that businesses depend on to make payroll froze completely. Companies couldn't get overnight loans. Banks wouldn't lend to each other. Nobody trusted anybody. The entire global financial system was 48 hours away from a complete breakdown. And so the government did what governments do when the powerful make catastrophic mistakes. It made ordinary people pay for it. $700 billion, taken from taxpayers, given to the banks. Millions of ordinary Americans lost their homes, lost their jobs, lost their savings, lost their retirement. But the banks? The banks got a bailout. Somewhere in the world, someone was watching all of this, and they had had enough. October 31st, 2008. Halloween. While America was still reeling from the Lehman collapse, while Congress was arguing about the bailout, while millions of people were losing their homes, an email arrived in the inbox of a small, obscure cryptography mailing list. The sender's name? Satoshi Nakamoto. The subject line: Bitcoin P2 P2P e-cash paper. The first line of the email read, "I've been working on a new electronic cash system that's fully peer-to-peer, with no trusted third party." Who was Satoshi Nakamoto? This is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the modern age. We know almost nothing about them with certainty. The name is Japanese, but the writing uses British spelling, favor, color. The code was brilliant, expert level. The timing of their posts suggested they were awake during European or East Coast American hours. They registered the bitcoin.org domain in Finland. Were they one person? A team? A man? A woman? Nobody knows. What we do know is that they were deeply angry at what the banking system had done, and they had spent years building the solution. All denied it. All remained suspects. Satoshi never confirmed, never denied. They simply disappeared. But before they disappeared, they left us something extraordinary. The Bitcoin white paper, 9 pages, written in dry academic language. No drama, no manifesto, no rage. Just a problem, clearly stated, and a solution, precisely designed. So what was the problem, and what was the solution? The problem. When you send money electronically today, you are not actually sending money directly to anyone. You are asking a bank, a third party, to update their records, to subtract from your account and add to someone else's. You trust the bank to do this honestly. You trust them not to freeze your account. You trust them not to lose your money. You trust them not to fail. September 2008 proved that this trust, this fundamental trust that underpins the entire financial system, was misplaced. Satoshi's solution. What if you could send value directly to another person without any bank in the middle, without any government in the middle, without trusting anyone, not because the other person was trustworthy, but because the math was trustworthy, because the system itself, by its very design, made cheating impossible. Satoshi called it a blockchain. Imagine a ledger, a record book of every transaction ever made, not held by one bank, not controlled by one government, but copied simultaneously on thousands of computers all over the world. Every transaction ever made, completely public, completely transparent, completely permanent, impossible to change, impossible to fake. When you send 1 Bitcoin to someone, that transaction is broadcast to the entire network. Thousands of computers, called miners, race to verify it, to confirm it. Once confirmed, it's written into the blockchain, forever. No bank can reverse it. No government can freeze it. No executive can steal it. The math is the banker. The code is the law. This was the revolutionary idea. Not just a new currency, a new kind of money. Money that didn't need to trust any human institution. Money that ran on mathematics. Money that belonged to nobody and therefore to everybody. January 9th, 2009, 6 days after the Genesis block, Satoshi released the Bitcoin software to the public. One man was waiting, Hal Finney, a brilliant cryptographer from California. One of the most respected figures in the cypherpunk world, a man who had spent his career working on digital privacy and electronic money. Finney had been following Satoshi's work since the white paper, immediately downloaded the software. He ran it on his own computer. He helped test the network in those first fragile days, and on January 12, 2009, 9 days after the Genesis block, Hal Finney received the first Bitcoin transaction in history. 10 Bitcoin, sent directly from Satoshi Nakamoto. No bank involved, no clearinghouse, no government, just 2 people and the blockchain. Hal Finney continued to contribute to Bitcoin for years to come. In 2009, he was diagnosed with ALS, a terminal motor neuron disease. He continued writing code from his wheelchair. He died in 2014. Some believed he was Satoshi Nakamoto. He always denied it, right to the end. The mystery endures. For the first year of its existence, Bitcoin had no price. You couldn't buy it, you couldn't sell it. It was just code, running on a handful of computers. Then, on May 2010, a programmer in Florida named Laszlo Hanyecz posted something on the Bitcoin forum. He wrote, "I'll pay 10,000 Bitcoins for a couple of pizzas." A man in Britain took him up on the offer. He ordered 2 Papa John's pizzas and had them delivered to Laszlo. Laszlo paid him 10,000 Bitcoin. The first real commercial Bitcoin transaction. The first time anyone had used Bitcoin to buy something in the physical world. The value of those 10,000 Bitcoin at the time, roughly $41. The value of those 10,000 Bitcoin today? At Bitcoin's peak in early 2026, when Bitcoin hit $109,000 per coin, those two pizzas would have been worth over $1 billion. $1 billion for two large Papa John's pizzas. Laszlo has said he doesn't regret it. He was happy to help prove that Bitcoin could be used as real money. But May 22nd is now celebrated every year as Bitcoin Pizza Day, perhaps the most expensive meal in recorded history. For 2 years after the launch, from 2009 to 2010, Satoshi Nakamoto was an active presence, answering emails, posting on the Bitcoin forum, fixing bugs, writing code, guiding the project through its earliest, most fragile days. By late 2010, Bitcoin had a small but passionate community. Thousands of people were running the software. It had survived its first attacks. It had proven it worked. And then, without warning, Satoshi began to step back. On December 12, 2010, Satoshi made their last public post on the Bitcoin forum. A technical post about a software update. Nothing dramatic, nothing significant, no farewell. Then, on April 26, 2011, Satoshi sent a final private email to one of the Bitcoin developers. It read simply, "I've moved on to other things." And then, nothing. Satoshi Nakamoto was never heard from again. They left behind a functioning network, an open source code base, a small but devoted community, and approximately 1 million Bitcoin sitting untouched in digital wallets. Never moved, never spent. Worth, at today's prices, somewhere between $80 billion and $100 billion. Why did Satoshi disappear? Some say they feared legal action from governments. Some say it was always the plan, to create something with no leader, no single point of failure, no individual who could be pressured, arrested, or corrupted. A currency with no king. And so its creator became no one. After Satoshi vanished, Bitcoin was on its own, and it went on to write one of the most extraordinary financial stories in human history. 2009, Bitcoin's price, essentially zero. No exchange, no market price, just math and belief. October 2009, first recorded exchange rate. $1 could buy you 1,309 Bitcoin. May 2010, two pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, $0.0041 per coin. 2011, Bitcoin crossed $1 for the first time, then surged to $32, then crashed back to $2. The first Bitcoin bubble, the first Bitcoin crash, the first time everyone said it was over. It wasn't. 2013, Bitcoin crossed $100. Then $1,000, then crashed again. Media called it a scam, a bubble, a fraud. Then they fell silent. 2017, Bitcoin hit $20,000. The world lost its mind. Then it crashed 80% back to $3,200. Media called it dead, again. 2022-2021, institutions arrived. Tesla, MicroStrategy, Square. Companies bought Bitcoin. PayPal, Visa, payment giants adopted it. Bitcoin hit $69,000. December 2024, Bitcoin crossed $100,000 for the first time. A psychological landmark no one had believed was possible back in 2008 when the first email was sent. October 6, 2025, new all-time high, $126,210. From $0.0008 to $126,210. From nothing to a market capitalization of over $2 trillion. More than the GDP of most countries on Earth. More than the value of all the gold mined in human history, combined in some calculations. From a 9-page document on a cryptography mailing list to the most significant monetary invention since the printing press.